Hi, I'm Paul Perdue, and I am the infrastructure nerd.
And I'm Mary Jo Boyd, a legal technologist.
You know, when Tabs3 comes out of the box, there's all this detail in the middle of the bill, date, initials, what was done, the hours, the amount, everything.
You know, it would be really nice if we could just take some of that information out, put in the information that we really want to see on the bill, and make it nice.
Well, actually, by using the statement template designer, you can have a variety of different formats set up for all the different needs that you have as far as much detail.
Well, can you show us how that works?
I sure can. Okay, so we're going to start in the client manager and pull up a specific client. We'll pull up Michael Larson, and we'll look at his workers' comp matter. And if we go directly into the client information part of the client manager, one of the things we'll be able to see and is right here on the Statement Options tab, the draft template and the final template. Okay, these two templates define these two fields define which template is being used for this particular matter for this particular client. So you have the ability to set up these templates. We're going to look at that in a second, don't worry. And then say, this is the template that we want to use when printing draft bills for this matter, and this is the template that we want to use when printing final bills. So where do you go to set those up? Right here in statement preparation. Okay, I lied. In statements, under statement setup. And it is statement templates. So I'm going to make this take the full screen, and we're going to talk about this. So if I pull up that draft template that we saw just a minute ago when we were in Michael Larson's record, these are the decisions that have been made about how a statement will look when it's printed with the draft template. First, we have a description. We have whether or not this is to be used as a default for new clients for draft or final. That's how you make this definition appear all the time for every new matter that you open. It can always be changed. So if we pull up draft, we'll see that it's to be used as the draft statement default for new clients. And if we were to pull up final, we would see that it is to be used for the final statement default for new clients. Okay? So to go further, then statement type is either invoice or statement. Statement format means that payments and previous balances do appear. Invoice format means that those things do not appear, only new work. So on this one, we're going to see previous balance $1,000, all the stuff that was done, payment of $1,000, total due of whatever. Here we're just going to see all the stuff that was done in the total due without any regard for any payments that were made and any regard for any previous balances. This is whether or not we're going to include the history and how. This is whether or not we're going to print a past due message and how we want it to look. This is whether or not we're going to have a beginning or ending note, and those notes can be set up someplace else. We'll take a look at those. And so these are notes that can appear at the beginning or ending of the bill before the detail. And then whether or not those notes should be included for each matter when you're combining statements, and whether those should be included on a cover statement or just on the detail. Okay? Print statement comments on draft statements. Statement comments are those hidden text that you can put into fees that can show up on a draft but will never show up on a final. Allow page break and transaction descriptions if you have wordy attorneys or wordy timekeepers that sometimes go on for a paragraph or two in their descriptions. You're going to want to make sure this is set. Then we get to the tab that defines the fee format. Do we want to show the date, the timekeeper initials, the description, the rate, and the total for non-billable hours? And when we're showing hours, do we show detail or just totals or none? Do we show the amount in detail or just in subtotals and totals or just in totals? Do we use paragraph format, which will lump transactions together by date and timekeeper, or just into one big, huge paragraph? And do we want a subtotal? And if so, do we want it to be by timekeeper, transcode, category, date, or no subtotal? Now here we also have something called fee recap, which is the recapitulation at the bottom. Do we want to recapitulate by timekeeper? Bob had this much time, George had this much time, or by level, partners logged this much time, associates logged that much time, or by rate. And this is going to effectively show you two different entries if you have a timekeeper that worked on two different transactions with two different rates. So usually rate is used only in instances where you've got people working at like rates and you just want to subtotal by that rate itself, or no recap. And then in the recap, if you were to choose it, do you include the hours, the total, the level description, if it's the timekeeper level? And do you want the rate to be calculated, average hourly, not at all, or the transaction rate? Then the cost payment format is a little simpler than the fee format. For expenses, do we just show them? Do we do T-code detail with subtotal? In other words, we're gonna show a subtotal for each transaction code, a T-code with subtotal only. In other words, this would list this, and subtotal for that transaction code, whereas this here, T-code subtotal only, would just say so much for that transaction code. A summary or no expenses. And then we have the same thing for advances, because remember, we can have both expenses and advances appear on a bill. Sometimes people will only log these things under expenses and they'll say no advances, or only log them under advances and say no expenses, or if you're using both, you want to set up a format for both. And then we have payment format, which is either detail, totals only, or totals by date. In other words, if we got 7 payments, detail will list all 7. If we got 7 payments and you've chosen total only, it'll only show the total. If we got 7 payments spread out over 2 different dates, total by date would show 2 entries. One summarizing, let's say, 3 of them, and one summarizing 4 of them based on the date that the payment was logged. And then finally, which layouts do you want to use? Now, Mary Jo just recorded a Paul and Mary Jo show that goes into the statement layout designer. This is letting you select which layout. Now, for better detail on what these mean, because what I'm really doing is I'm showing you how to set up the templates, how to link them into a particular matter, how to set it so that all matters default to a certain template when they're set up unless they're changed. To get into the details, you'll want to look at this context-sensitive help, which is going to show you information about all these different fields. So just get into the statement template screen, hit the little yellow question mark, and you'll get to help that's going to show you for each of these fields what exactly the different selections are, and give you examples of how they would look. So you can have as many templates as you need. You might have them broken down by areas of practice. That's very common. You might have an instance, for instance, where your estate planning clients get very little detail. Maybe they get just a description, a list of what was done and a total amount that's due. So for them, you'd have the fee format not show the date, maybe show the date, probably not. Just show the description, standard. There would be no hours, there'd be just the amount total, okay? So you could make that happen by defining a template, probably called EP draft or EP final, or creating both of those. Remember that you can have different things appear on the draft than appear on the final. Now, for a lot of our clients, they don't want that. They want the lawyers and people that are reviewing bills to see exactly what the client's going to see. So they want the drafts to look exactly like the final. Sometimes we'll run into a situation where, for instance, we want to see this billing history on the drafts, but we don't want the client to see it. Or maybe we don't care about the aging on the drafts, but we want them to show up on the final. So it's possible to show more detail or different details on the draft statements. Again, assuming that the people that are reviewing the bills understand that the finals may look different, that certainly is an option. One kind of neat trick, if you say, well, I really like this final that's here, but I want to change just one thing. You can pull up the final and then change the name to something that doesn't already exist. And it will create a new layout called test with all the settings that you had on the final. So to summarize that part, if you just pull up one that already exists, let's say final, let's pull up draft. I'm not going to change that test when I create it, and then change this to something else and put a new description in, then you are basically replicating those settings that you had in the first one that you pulled up and giving it a new name, new description. So as I was starting to say, these different templates quite frequently will fall down the lines of area of practice. Oh, for the criminal cases, we have to show all the detail in the world. For the estate planning, we only want to show what we did and a total amount due. Maybe for the transactional real estate work, we want to show date and attorney initials and what we did, but not hours, not rate, not amount for each individual transaction, just a total hours and total amount at the bottom. So you might call one of these templates that you're creating real estate draft, real estate final. You might call another set of them estate planning draft, estate planning final. Maybe you find that you don't need draft and final. You use the same format. It's just a matter of whether you're printing a final or not. The template doesn't say anything about whether you're printing a final. It's just that you can have a different one for draft and a different one altogether for final. So you don't need to worry about using the same template for both draft and final. It's a matter of whether you actually say we're printing final bills at the time that you print the bills. Now we saw where that gets set up. Let's see, did I leave that open? Yes. In the client section, you go over to the statement options tab, and once you've set up your templates, this is where you indicate on a matter by matter basis which one is to be used for that matter. So theoretically, you could have a client that has 4 different matters, and each bill looks different because you're using a different statement template. Again, that sometimes is the way it falls in a firm that a client might have 4 different formats because each matter is in a different area of practice, or each matter has a different primary timekeeper. Another way that we see this being used is that primary timekeeper, the people who are reviewing the bills, they like the bills that go to their clients to look a little different than the other guy. So that's quite common too, that you'll have templates that are defined down the lines of timekeeper. Bob likes his bills to look like this. Phil likes his bills to look like that. And of course, you can mix and match. Bob likes his real estate bills to look like that, but Phil likes his real estate bills to look like something different, while the firm as a whole has agreed that the estate planning bills should all look a certain way. So you can mix and match how you're defining the templates. Another thing that we do quite commonly see is we might have a firm where the attorneys have different letterhead for their bills. Maybe because it's really just an association of attorneys and they're not really a firm. So the statement templates can point to different layouts. If you look at the other Paul and Mary Jo show that deals with the statement layout designer, you'll note that we can create different layouts for a variety of different needs, including different letterheads. So you can actually have one layout that is for Bob Smith, attorney at law, and another layout that makes the bills look like they're coming from Jones and Associates. And you can operate those all within the same billing and accounting system, with all the same people summarized on the common accounts receivable reports, but having their bills look like they're coming from different firms. And we do that by defining different templates that then in turn point to different layouts. So there you have it, the statement template designer and how it can let you set up different formats for all your different needs.
And that's just one more way that we can help you to worry less
And practice more.